welcome to the Aonics podcast, a podcast about software engineering, new ways of working, and lots of other interesting stuff. Today I have with me, which is very fun, returning guest Yatish.
Hi Marcus, thanks for having me.
You had a very popular episode on hexagonal architecture.
Yeah?
That one was, a lot of people really liked that one. And I was getting in touch with you again and we were chatting. And then you said like, yeah, I'm doing a pretty cool certification on AWS. So maybe we could have a chat about that. Maybe you can start by saying what kind of certification it is and why did you start working on it?
Sure. Yeah. So actually, I'm working on the AWS Certified Solutions Architect Associate certification specifically. Right. And I mean, I'm working as a solutions architect, and it's been the cloud is the new, not a new trend, but it is a trend where all the clients want to move from on-premise to the cloud, and AWS is very, very popular, right? So that's why I chose to on this particular platform to do the certification. Other platforms also offer the certification, but this is very popular, and I wanted to learn on the AWS because a lot of clients were asking for AWS certification specifically.
And what is Solutions Architect Associate? It's more than just like an introduction into the platform, right? It's really specifically about architecting solutions on the platform, or what is it about?
Yeah, so it is. So there is another course which is called Cloud Practitioner, which is more of a foundation course that and it talks about what is cloud computing in general and what is cloud and all that stuff. But solutions architect is actually an associate level. The certification is more deep into it, and it talks about how you actually create your solution, right? How you create your own virtual private cloud in your subnet, and then how you create your EC2 instances, or the servers that you want to use, how you protect them, what is their security, who is allowed, who is not allowed, right? So a lot of things are there. And then going into the certification, they pretty much ask you a question in a more scenario based, saying that assume you are a solutions architect at a particular client. They have XYZ requirements, and then what would you suggest them, in the AWS platform, right? So that's the kind of certification it is.
So it's really, in terms of the whole process of software engineering and building an application and deploying it, it's more like a solution architect would design the whole cloud infrastructure.
Exactly. Cloud infrastructure, as well as how the application is actually going to fit into it, right? So the whole idea of solution architect and the cloud is like you have to focus on a scalability, right? How your application is going to scale. The availability part, right? If some of your machines go down, how your application and your data is going to be available, right? In various across the world nowadays, everything is global. So, and then the networking, right? How fast you can do a throughput, and your storage, right? Whether you can access your storage in a fast way, in a cost effective way, and then across the globe, right? So all these factors are involved when you design a particular solution. And then again with the AWS or any cloud, they are all elastic, right? So all these things can be on demand. It can be increased or it can be decreased, right? So that's where you have to see which specific solution fits over here, giving all these parameters, and also cost effective, right? That's also another point. Yeah.
And you have a background as a software engineer, and would you say in general, if your job doesn't require you to design your own environment, is it still useful to know this kind of stuff as a software engineer, or is it more specifically if you want to get into this field of designing your own solution?
Well, as a software engineer also, it really helps. Maybe you would not create an entire architecture, as I talked about, like you're creating your virtual private cloud and subnet. So when you actually go to AWS, it creates the underlying infrastructure for you, right? All you need to do is, okay, I need one server and I need, let's say, WebSphere to run over there or a Spring Boot to run. You install all your softwares by yourself and then start using it, right? You don't need to worry about the networking, right? That is taken care by AWS for a layman, right? But when you go advanced as a solution architect, you want to create a network. Since it's in the cloud, security is a big thing, right? So anybody should not be able to access your cloud. So that's where you need to create all those networking and the virtual private cloud and subnets.
Right. So it really requires some more foundational knowledge about networking, security,
absolutely,
performance, and those kind of topics.
Right. Yeah, and this certification actually, when I'm preparing it for, right, so the VPC is a big chapter, right, and a lot of questions in the certification actually come from VPC side of it. That
what is VPC?
VPC is virtual private cloud.
Oh yeah.
So since you now it's I mean, somewhere in the data center those servers are there, but for me or for a company it is in virtual, right? You don't see those servers physically. No, sure. Right? So that's why it's virtual and it's a private cloud, right? So only your organization can access it, no one else can access it.
So it's really about, for example, like a bank or an insurance company, like designing your whole infrastructure with also everything about how the data can be stored safely, conforming to all the regulations, like all this kind of stuff.
Absolutely, right. So yeah, there are all those compliance things there, like how much data you need to keep it, where you want to keep it, and there are, as you mentioned, right, financial companies require that my data need to be in my own region. It should not be replicated anywhere else. Yeah, so all these things are there, right? So that's where you have to design your solution accordingly.
But just out of interest, is this kind of role, like a solution architect associate, is it normally at a big organization? Is it also in the practice like a specific position, or is it more a task that you do as a DevOps engineer, or like how does that work?
Well, in a big organization, solutions architect is a specific role, and in general, solutions architect, as it says, solutions architect, not just one solution. So right. In general, solutions architect actually work with multiple projects within an organization, right? So multiple team, this role is actually point of contact for all the other teams, and they come to this role and says like, okay, we want to expand our architecture. How do we do it, right? We want to move our applications to the cloud. How do we do it, right? So this is the to-go person, right?
Yeah. I see. Yeah. But is this a role that you want to specifically work on in the future, or you combine it still with software engineering yourself?
Well, I think once you have already worked as a senior software engineer or principal software engineer, this is the next level that one should achieve, right? So that's where my journey started, right? So I worked as a engineer, and then I said like, now I want to be an architect. I still wants to do a hands-on coding, which this role would also do that, because you need to work with AWS. You can write code, you can use their command line interface or
APIs and stuff,
right? Exactly, right. So you are still coding it, but then a lot of part is designing it and thinking about it, about the failures, about the security, about the scalability, all those aspects.
But you also need to understand the people that come to you are probably software engineers,
right?
And then you can at least talk in the same language, and you know everything about Spring Boot and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So you bridge that gap, right? This role actually plays it's not a DevOps role. DevOps is actually doing things on a every single day basis, right? This is more of a designing it and making sure that this architecture is going to work in cloud. And like for example, I created this architecture, right? And then suddenly that website became popular, and they started having DDoS attack or distributed denial of service attack, right? Then they will come to the architect like, oh, what do we do? Right? Then we'll have to take a call saying that, oh, there is another component called AWS Shield, right? Which will be in front of our website, and it will filter it like, who is allowed, who is not allowed, and it will look into all those IP addresses and, disallow those requests so that our applications don't go down, right? So something like that.
Yeah, so you're the go-to person for any
Right.
issues with architecture and
Right. Yeah.
And what is the difficult part of the actual certification process? Like, is it just a lot of stuff you need to know, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. AWS is a big thing. I mean, I would call it as like, it's an ocean, right?
Right.
So I think it has more than 200 plus services. To know each and every service at any point in time, it's pretty much close to impossible, right? to
Right,
to
right,
to
right.
understand, like, how it works, right? So again, as long as yeah, someone starts with, like, this basic knowledge of, like, the scalability, reliability, durability, and then security, all these aspects, and then start building other services, and know more about AWS. So that's the thing, right? So going into this certification, you don't know where the question is going to come from, right? And it's all
Right.
scenario based question. There's no textbook to read from, right? So you really need to get into it should be in your head, like, okay, given this problem, how would I solve this problem, right? So there's a lot of things from software engineer world. It will come into, like, problem solving, understanding the problem, and then say, okay, this product is going to work over here because it has particular this characteristics. For example, like, if you need to upload a file in S3, which is another storage service in Amazon, then they can allow like unlimited storage in S3.
Right.
But one file cannot be more than like 5 terabytes. There's a limitation,
Okay.
right? And then if you're uploading 5 terabyte file, you can't upload it, like, in just one single way, because there would be internet connection, it's going to a public internet, right? So then you
Right.
have to do it a multi-part upload. So the scenario is whether you can do a multi-part from your application or not. If you cannot do it, then S3 is not a solution for you. You have to look for
I
another
see.
solution,
I
right?
see.
That's the kind of a thing.
But you said there's no book for this?
There is no book, in the sense there is no the questions, I mean, there are trainings available, right?
Right.
And like, Amazon provides a lot of training, and the other companies are,
Resources.
yeah, their resources are there, but you have to do a self learning, and then
Right, right, right.
working with it, right? So one good thing about AWS is actually, you just go to AWS and sign up as a personal or a business, and they give you 12-month free tier to use their infrastructure.
Right. So you can just
So
experiment and try out
exactly,
stuff. Yeah.
exactly, right? You create your own scenario, you work with it, and you create it, and then see whether you are achieving it or not. That's the best way to practice
Yeah,
this
so
certification. Yeah.
it's not like with maybe more some traditional certifications for Java or something where there's just this big book, you learn all the stuff about the
Right.
JVM and whatever, and then you answer the questions and you're done. You really need to
Right.
dive into it, get to know the infrastructure, the
Right.
platforms, the
Yeah.
services,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. That's the reason I said there is no book or as such, like, it's not theoretical. It's a scenario based thing, right?
Right, right.
You have to know in depth, right? Or actually understand the concept.
And how, I mean, you're still doing it, but um, like just as an indication, like if you want to do something like this, how much time do you think you would need for it? Like, is it a thing you can do in a month, or you need really some more time?
Well, it is so on the time perspective, I am saying, uh, I think, I would not give, like, exact time, like, because time depends
No, no,
on
sure,
yeah, each
sure.
person. But yeah, you need to be in it, right? So with any certification, right, if you're doing it, and if you're using it every single day, and make sure that it's getting into your head,
Right,
so yeah, give yourself roughly about 1 and 1.5 month to start with. Initially it will be slow, and then you'll get
right,
into it, and then you are too much into it, and then you say, okay, now I'm ready to do it, and then you
right,
have to
right,
do a lot of practice questions as well, right, to see where you stand. There are a lot
right.
of resources available for practice questions as
Ah,
well.
that's great.
Yeah.
And then in the end, like you said, it's an exam with mostly these kind of scenarios
Right. Yeah.
that you have to answer. And but I'm just curious, do you is it do you like actually need to build the infrastructure? Is it just you describing it if you do the exam? Do you know?
Yeah, in the exam you don't need to do a kind of a practical to show them how would you do it,
Okay,
but
yeah.
it is more about what would you do it, right?
Right,
Which
right,
option
right.
you would choose. And then
Right.
yeah, so another tricky part in this certification is there are two types of question. One is multiple choice question, that means out of four you have to choose like
Yeah.
one. And the another is multiple response question. So that means the answer to one question may be more than one. So two or three
I
answers
see.
are correct
I
as
see.
well,
Right,
right?
right, right.
So if somebody says, okay, what are the ways to store file in AWS, right?
There could
Let's say
be
this is
multiple options.
right.
Yeah,
It could be S3, it could be EFS, it could be EBS. There are
I see.
multiple ways to do it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, cool. And
yeah.
so it sounds like it's not something you would do as a developer unless you uh, also really want to, how do you say, work in that position, basically.
Right. So yeah, number one is like as a developer, if you have an interest, you can always do that. But then
Right.
you have to have your create a AWS account. That's my suggestion. Create a AWS account, play with it. Since it's a free
Right.
tier, you can play with it, and then think about it like this is where you want to go. And there are many other certificates. So I'm doing solutions architect
Right.
associate.
Right.
There are certifications for developers as well.
I see. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Specifically for
So
developers.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it says AWS developer associate, AWS as
Sure.
developer professional, and for DevOps, for SysOps.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of
What
certifications
is
are there. Yeah.
what is the difference between associate and professional? Is it like a ranking? Professionals higher than associate, or the other way around?
Yeah, actually, no, you're right. So professional is higher than the associate, and
I see.
professional is the top one, right? So
Okay.
there you will go way deeper into that one, right? So one is the cloud practitioner, which is the foundation, and then the
Oh yeah.
next is associate, which
Associate.
is
I see.
yeah, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
most of the people do the associate. And
Right.
then you
Right.
go professional. Let's say I'm going into AWS, or actually I'm going for a job in Amazon itself, where I
Yeah.
need to talk to client to talk about AWS products. That's where the
Yeah. Yeah.
professional
Yeah.
comes into play, where you can go
I
much
see.
deeper into it.
Yeah. Then you're really an AWS specialist whose whole
Right,
job it is to sell and build
right.
AWS services, basically.
Yeah, you're
Interesting.
24/7 AWS resource kind of a stuff, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah.
I guess there's probably nowadays a good market for that kind
Oh,
of
absolutely,
thing.
absolutely, right. And more and more AWS is going into a managed service. So that
Right.
means, yeah, I can create my own servers, but then AWS is saying you can pay me, and I can give you a managed service, and that's where they have a dedicated solutions architect for their client.
Ah,
Depending upon the size of the client, they have I have given you a dedicated one, and he will solve your
I
problem, right?
see.
Yeah.
I see. But you can also, I guess, if you get really good at this stuff, basically sell your own services as a professional to
Yeah.
companies. Like, hey, I will set up your whole infrastructure and I'll manage it for you, and you
Yeah,
can just pay me for it.
absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting. And so, what was the decision to kind of start making that switch from senior software engineer to solution architect, or is it still ongoing?
Well, no, I mean, I was working. I mean, so it is a transition, right? So in the previous projects, I was working as a senior software engineer. But then I saw there is an opportunity. A lot of times in the project, I'm looking for an architect, and they are not available, right?
I
And I
see.
said,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I can make this decision myself. I understand like the entire flow. I can also
Right.
architect, right? So that's where I saw there is a gap over there, and I can fill that gap. So that's where I started
And
transitioning.
and generally, is it how do you say, like a better paid position than software engineer, or similar, or
Yeah, it is better paid, right? So it's
better paid?
going, yeah, it is going higher on that one, and it requires a lot of other skills like your presentation skills, your
Right. Right.
communication skills,
Talking
because
to all the shareholders,
Exactly,
stakeholders.
right. And then you may need to talk to a technical team as well as a non-technical team from business owners. Exactly. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, interesting. Thanks, Yatish. It sounds like a very good transition you're making, and it makes me think that maybe it would be interesting in a while when you have the certification and also have done the job, then maybe we can do kind of a follow-up.
Sure, anytime, you know that, right? Yeah, absolutely.
To see how it is because did you already have a professional position as a solution architect, or you still need to start your first one?
I need to start my first one.
All right. Yeah, I think it would actually be quite interesting to hear from your experience once you have some experience on the first position, because maybe there are other people listening, developers who are thinking about, making a similar transition.
Move and transition. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
Yeah.
And
thank you, Marcus, for having me all the time, always.
Yeah. I'm sure we will speak again.
Absolutely. Thank you.